Welcome to I May Be Wrong.
I don't know what this world is coming to,
but I don't think so. We're broadcasting from the greater Nashville area, the home of country music, beyond the borders of political correctness and identity politics. Facts and faith are our demarcations. Truth lights our path.
Here's the Barry White of Podcast Radio,
the Venerable Alfonso Ashworth.
Well, welcome to another exciting episode of I May Be Wrong, but I Don't Think So. Of course, we got a very exciting show lined up for you today. It's going to be a great episode. We're going to be discussing the Constitution. We got our guest waiting in the queue, Mr. Hal Rounds. Of course, if you're not familiar with Mr. Rounds, we're going to tell you, Mr. Rounds is a Fayette County resident. Hal was born in California, where he grew up. He earned a bachelor's degree in economics at the University of California in Santa Barbara. He served in the U.S. Air Force. Thank you for your service, sir. And earned a Bronze Star during his year in Vietnam. He came to Tennessee over 40 years ago, making his career of 25 years at FedEx, sharing that career with his wife, Mickey. Of course, while at FedEx, he earned his degree in law at the University of Memphis and litigated issues in family law and motorist rights, working with the National Motorists Association. He was admitted to the bar of the Supreme Court of the United States in 2008 and is since retired. Pursuing his deepest interest in history, a commitment to the Constitution, he has written extensively in journals from Aviation Week to the San Francisco Chronicle and is published regularly in the Fayette Falcon for the past 4 years. He has also been active in conservative public politics in Tennessee, testifying in and working with members of the Assembly of issues with textbooks to abuse of assistant forfeitures to making speed limit conform to the federal regulations. Mr. Rounds has stood out as a Fayette County citizen who has regularly shared our Declaration of Independence with citizens in the 4th of July courthouse observance. Of course, he has developed a Constitution refresher, a seminar to reacquaint citizens with the Constitution of the United States, which he has presented to dozens of civic groups around the country, including the Reagan Ranch Center in Santa Barbara. He is the author of American History as a Political Tool, a criticism of American history curricula in current schools, and it's available, of course, on Amazon. We got this wonderful guest coming on at a time that's perfect for what's happening right now, today, the impeachment hearings that's happening in this pile of Schiff on Capitol Hill. Now, I did say Schiff, like Adam Schiff, so don't get it twisted. This is nonsense, and it's something that you and I and all of America should be concerned about what's going on today with this impeachment investigation, this witch hunt, this attack on a duly elected president of the United States to overturn an election that many in the media and many in politics, even on the Republican side, were never happy with the fact that Donald J. Trump shocked the world in 2016 when he won that election. They still have not gotten over this, and it's nonsense, but we're going to be discussing this. Maybe also at some point I might bring some other people on this topic and have more of a series that talks about this in terms of our Constitution, because we won't be able to cover it all in just one show. So we're hoping that we can bring others on the show at some point and get these people that have more knowledge than myself. But of course, Alfonso Ashworth at I May Be Wrong, but I Don't Think So.com. You can follow the show. You can subscribe on the show. You can donate on the show. You can go to our website, get all the latest podcasts. But at the moment, what I'm wanting to do is bring our guest on the show. Welcome to the show, Mr. Hal Rounds. Hi, sir. How you doing?
Doing well, sir. And yourself?
I am doing fantastic. I feel great. I feel like that we got a lot that's going to happen on the program today. We're going to get right into it. Your bio speaks for itself, and I'm if I butchered it a little bit, please accept my apologies. But of course, we're looking forward to hearing from you. Let my audience know a little bit in terms of your background. How did you get involved in the history of the Constitution? What was your passion? What led you to go in that direction?
Well, I've been interested in the history of the United States since I was a kid. It started with studying wars and gradually got into why we fight them. And in my life, I've always been kind of interested in politics. One of the times I got in trouble when I was a child was I put an "I like Ike" sticker on the grill of my dad's Buick, and that wasn't good for the radiator, so I got in trouble for that. But that's how far back it goes, 1956. In my life, I've always been involved either in peripheral parts of campaigning. Always been interested in law and how these things work out. I went to law school starting in 1990, and I made a note to myself to not get polluted by the anticipated liberal inclinations of the law college, University of Memphis. So I wrote down to myself the part of the Constitution I had already chosen as my favorite, which was the Ninth Amendment, which protects the rights of the people even if they are not listed in the Constitution. So I've been doing that for a long time. When I got out of law school, I did some divorce work and things that weren't really related to the Constitution. I did not find them very fun. But I eventually got involved with the National Motorists Association and did some stuff that had, for instance, a traffic ticket in Murfreesboro.
Okay.
Now, that seems like, well, that's just a local trivial thing. But if you look at it, the speed limit is controlled by federal government guidelines so that they'll be uniform across the country. And there is a provision in the Constitution that Congress has the power to establish post offices and post roads, which are any road chosen to carry the mail. So if you're going to be in a car somewhere and you're driving from Tennessee to California, perish the thought, then you're going to want to make sure that you drive on the right side of the road and that a stop sign is recognizable, and speed limits mean the same thing. So it was a federal issue, and I took that traffic ticket. I was defeated in the very first step in the courts, and I appealed it all the way through the Tennessee appellate courts and on up to the United States Supreme Court.
Wow.
Well, the National Motor Association helped me get appointed to the bar of the Supreme Court to do that. And the problem that you have with a case like that is that it seems so trivial. Oh, it's just a traffic ticket. But if you look at it, there's two elements that I thought were important. One is the most frequent interaction of a typical citizen with the law enforcement functions of his government is a traffic stop. So rather than that being trivial just because it's so common, really, in a way, it lays the groundwork for whether you trust your police or not. If they're following the law, then you've got to respect that. But if the speed limit hasn't been posted in accordance with federal regulations, then they're not really following the law.
Correct.
And so that's very important. And because the federal government has the authority to define how roads are done and so on, it is a federal issue. So I lost all the way up, but I fought it valiantly.
Right. But, of course, we know that you live to fight for another day.
Yes.
And speaking of that, with this day that we're faced with this impeachment,
right.
Hearing this impeachment fiasco is that I want to label it, what does that have to do with me and the other people out there listening in terms of constitutional rights and the right of a duly elected president to be able to do their function, and the right of Congress to investigate or to have these hearings. What do you call what is happening today that's important?
Well, it is an important function to make sure that the president isn't corrupt,
Okay.
and isn't abusing his office and so on. So in Article 2, Section 4, it provides, and I'll read it to you, the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall, not may, be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Then in another part of the Article 1, it provides that the House of Representatives does the impeaching, which is basically accusing. And then the Senate tries the accusation to see if they're valid and if they rise to the height where removal from office is necessary. And it's interesting to look at what it means when you separate those two functions. First of all, the House of Representatives was always, from the time of the ratification of the Constitution, intended to be the voice of the people in their national government. All right?
Right.
Now the Senate, on the other hand, is supposed to be from a different perspective. When the Constitution was written, the people did not elect their senators. That didn't happen until the 17th Amendment, 1913. But the purpose of the states having that voice, rather than the people, is to give a perspective from a governing point of view rather than from a citizen point of view, whether the wrongs actually violate the law or whatever the considerations are. All right, so today we have elected senators, and part of that distinction are washed away. And that's not a good turn, I think, because you want to have multiple viewpoints when you're looking at accusing and convicting someone. So,
well, I understand, and I appreciate that you're explaining it in a way that I think most people can understand. So these hearings today are just part of a process, and ultimately, the Senate will have the final say in a trial.
yes.
Right now, they're just investigating to see if there's enough evidence for someone to write the articles of impeachment that will go before the Senate, and during that time is when the charges will be proven, whether guilty or not guilty. But impeachment is not a criminal process, if I'm correct, right?
Well, that's true. There is a judicial aspect to it. And one of the things that's interesting to look at, only two presidents have been impeached. They've both been acquitted. They haven't been removed from office. And but there are other officers who have been impeached, and the list I have is of federal judges.
Right.
And there have been, I think it was 13, I don't remember the count, but of them who have been impeached. And the first one was in 1803 for mental instability and intoxication on the bench. He was John Pickering out of New Hampshire, and he was convicted and removed from office.
I remember reading about that one, yes.
Really? Okay, well, there's a whole variety of charges that were done on these different judges: abuse of the contempt power, oppressive conduct of trials, intoxication, and then actual theft, perjury, and that sort of thing. And some of them have been removed from office. The most recent was actually in 2010. Thomas Porteous of the District Court for Eastern Louisiana, and that was a penalty of false statements under perjury.
Yes.
Excuse me. Well, all of those things give a background where you can start looking at what is going to be a justification to remove a president from office. And that's what they're looking for. And frankly, the prosecution side, the Democrats, are seeking some way to get rid of this president. I mean, I like to try and talk in as neutral terms
as possible. Yes.
Yeah, regarding partisanship. But the Constitution is a political instrument, so you have to look at what's going on that way.
So whether we like it or not, we have to endure this, one, to make sure the Constitution is followed.
Yep.
And two, make sure that both sides are treated fairly.
Yeah, and that's the problem in a political process. It is said that this is a political process, not a legal process. And yet it has to have some legal forms for people to have respect for it and for it to be useful for the country. In the Senate, if and when an impeachment occurs and it goes to the Senate, for all these judges and people like that have been impeached, the vice president presides over the Senate hearing. There's an exception when the president is the one that's to be tried, and that requires the Constitution requires that such trials are headed by this Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, not by the Vice President. And you can see a couple of reasons for this. One is that legal process is most important in this case. But also, if the Vice President is presiding over a trial, it is going to put him as president.
Correct.
Then you have this tremendous conflict of interest. So that's why you wind up looking at choosing the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to be the substitute when the president is tried. It means there's this huge legal imperative involved with the whole proceedings. It is political, but it's also legal.
Well, and I think that makes it even more confusing to someone that's not as astute in the Constitution as yourself, because we've always been told that you're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
But in this process, it seems to be that the president is being accused as being guilty without the opportunity to have witnesses to question the accuser. So you're saying that the way the process is working at the moment is contrary to what a typical legal trial would be managed. It's not working in that regards.
Yeah. If you look at history, and part of what we emerged from in our English beginnings, there was a type of court called a Star Chamber, where people who the king or Parliament didn't like were put into this trial in a closed room, and there was no public exposure. The charges were not necessarily specified. The defense was hobbled, or if it existed at all, and people were gotten rid of by having this obscure and twisted legal process. And that was abolished centuries before a couple of centuries before we were formed as a separate country. We don't want that kind of secrecy when our president is being evaluated. But even if it was a secret hearing to set up the impeachment charges, the hearings really haven't been secret. They have been selectively...
They've been leaked, yes. Selectively
Exactly.
leaked, yes.
Yes. It is a constructed public image that is being released by the people conducting the hearings, i.e. Shifty. And it has been done with total... is the only thing that's transparent about this is that it is a clearly selected political construct that is being presented to the people. And there's two different elements to it that I would like to address.
Okay.
The first one is they talk about Trump being guilty of obstruction. And what he says is executive privilege. Now, if you look at legal proceedings, there's 4 kinds of privilege. There's spousal privilege, there's attorney-client privilege, there's religious privilege, and there is executive privilege.
Gotcha.
Now, every one of those is a protection for a person's right to consult intimately and express things that they wouldn't even think of doing in public. They might be experimenting with it. They might be saying, well, should I do this or should I do that? They want to have, particularly in attorney-client privilege, which is what I've been involved in, you want to have the power to go to your attorney and say, listen, I don't know if I should do this. I'm thinking about, robbing a store or beating up my wife's lover or something like that.
Right.
And what should I really do? What's the legal environment that I want to face? And you have to have that ability to say those things and not get in trouble for them, because you're trying to find out how to deal with them.
Yes.
And when you're dealing with foreign countries or with how to set up the military or things like that, you want to know from your counselor, your different agency heads, what would be a good idea? What about this idea? Okay, that's trash. Let's try something else. You want to be free to do that. And so the people who work in the White House that the president goes to for thinking, he has to be free to try things that are ridiculous and get rid of them, knowing that now that they really were ridiculous.
Right.
Without that conversation being exposed later. So, is privilege obstruction? I think not. Now, again, this only goes for the people that work with.
That's his inner circle. The
right.
People that he's using as a confidant. For example, Rudy Giuliani at one time was in that circle, but now he's outside the circle as a private attorney, if I'm not mistaken. So he could be in some type of risk. He could actually be in some type of danger for the simple fact that he's not inside the administration's protection in order to say executive privilege.
Well, now that would be officially, but if the president doesn't trust his other advisors, what does he do?
Well, that's a good question. And maybe that's the gray area here. Yeah.
Well, it's a gray area. And remember, we elected him to drain the swamp.
Yes.
Who do you think the swamp is? Let's take, for instance, that lady who was the ambassador to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Based on just the transcript of that one call, I look at that and I see that she was an ally of the previous president, but the call is ambiguous whether it was the previous president being Obama or the previous president of the Ukraine. Now, if she was in cahoots or just even worked better with the president of Ukraine, and he was thrown out because he had his own swamp that he created, and Trump is now working with the new guy, and she is really doesn't like the new guy, then she is an ambassador that we should not have in that position.
And the president has all the authority to remove anyone in his administration for really any reason that he chooses. There's some restraints on that were done. Andrew Johnson was impeached because partly he got rid of the Secretary of State, I think it was, and Congress had passed a law saying you can't do that without just cause. So there's some limitations on the president's discretion in that. But an ambassador would not probably fall under that rule.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah. And I think that's what's at question here. Of course, we're getting ready to come up on the end of the program, and I want to give you an opportunity, one, to tell people how they can reach you if they want to talk to you more about the Constitution, or maybe have you come and speak to their group. What's the easiest way to have them locate you, Hal?
Okay, well, I am on Facebook as Hal Rounds.
Okay.
And I waste too much time on that, but it's interesting. And I'll tell you what, if you have people that want to call into you, you can selectively pass them on to me.
I would be very honored to be able to help you in any way that I can, because we share a common bond in what we're doing here, and we're trying to be fair to everyone involved, even the fact that the Democrats have been trying to impeach this president since day one. We still try to be fair about the Constitution, and that's why I wanted you to come on, because I knew, one, you'd be fair about it, and two, you would give us the facts about what is and what isn't important. And we're just going to have to sit through this. We're just going to have to endure the process. Whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. But I'll give you the final thoughts on this before we end the show. Any closing thoughts about the Constitution that you would like to share? Getting about a minute.
The Constitution is so overwhelmingly important to everything we enjoy as a country today. But I go around the country and I give presentations that take a full day on it. And you can find that on halrounds.com online.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to come anywhere to do that. I've done it in Lebanon a couple of times.
Awesome.
And, I just want to share knowledge about the Constitution.
Right. And I think that we all need that more so today, especially in our school system, in our educational system. We need more people to be willing to go and talk to our young people about the Constitution, not just from a political party perspective, but from the founders' point of view and what it meant to this country. And I really want to thank you. I really appreciate you coming on and taking your time. Of course, everybody's probably having a moment with this hearing. Everybody's going to pick their sides, but at the end of the day, we have to trust the Constitution and what it means to this great nation, and that many, many people died and fought for. But Hal, I would like for you to maybe come back on and we can do some maybe more series of this and talk about the Constitution in different ways, if you'd be willing to do that.
I'd be very honored. Thank you.
I tell you what, I really appreciate you. And thank you, sir, for taking the time to come on. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. God bless you, sir.
Bless you, too. Thanks very much.
Of course, that was my guest for today, Mr. Hal Rounds. And he was a great, great American. And I was honored to be introduced to Mr. Rounds by a dear, dear friend that I was very close with during the Tea Party. Also, people that I know through the Tea Party organization. I made a lot of really good friends, and this is how I'm able to reach out to some of these people that are just as smart, just as intelligent, just as well-versed as people that you hear on some of these network shows. Matter of fact, they're probably more passionate about what they're doing because they are out there with you and I, the American people, and they discuss these issues with us. And these individuals have paid the same price. They've served the same country. They served in our military. They've sacrificed everything to be a part of making sure that we Americans are given the same rights as others, especially as our politicians, those we elect to send to Washington or the State House or in our state government, to our governors, to our House of Representatives, on down the line to the legislators, everybody that we elect, our judges, they are held responsible to us because of what? Because of the Constitution of the United States, something that many people are wanting to do away with. we're just not going to sit back and allow it to happen. Of course, I want to thank you for being a part of the show today. I want to thank you. Of course, as always, I want to tell you, God bless you, God bless America, and peace.
You've been listening to Alfonso Worth, the Barry White of Podcast Radio. Go forth and share his message. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. Remember, no two people can ever occupy the same place at the same time. You were uniquely and wonderfully made. Born an original. Don't die a copy. God bless. Peace.